This is my video about the best part of every card game. I absolutely love all sorts of different card games, but there's one thing that I've recognized from playing many card games, and is that making a card game is super duper hard. It is way harder than it looks to actually make a functional card game. There are so many different pitfalls that vary based on the type of card game that you are making and vary depending on the way your systems interact in your game. The companion mechanic from Magic the Gathering seems like a mechanic that would be right at home in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Hearthstone. However, because of the way that the mechanic works when it interacts with Magic's maximum hand size and the ability to have one card every single game, Companion was completely broken and caused tons of issues for the game. A card like Sixth Sense looks right at home in Hearthstone, rolling a dice and drawing or milling a random number of cards depending on the dice roll, but a card like this in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is so powerful that it has been on the ban list ever since its original printing. The Pokemon developers looking at Tropical Beach look at a card and said it was weak enough to be presented as a prize card, but having a stadium that lets you draw 7 cards and end your turn ended up being so powerful that this stadium card was massively coveted for players who wanted to play in the tournament where they won it, meaning that this card ended up being a super high price tag and super important to winning the game and shared around amongst many players, which is a crazy story for what a prize card shouldn't be. And for those who don't play Hearthstone, looking at a card like Ticketus, you may think a 6 mana 8/8 body is the main reason why this card is hated. However, the corrupted ability allowing you to mill 5 cards from the top of your opponent's deck was such a hated mechanic that many people quit the game after seeing or playing against Ticketus, which is something that in any other card game would definitely not be as brutal. Despite all this, these games have stuck around for many, many years, and that is what is much more important when it comes to making a card game, is making something that people will love and keep them sticking around year after year. These card games are all super unique, and that is one of the parts that I love the most about playing many card games. They are all very similar because they all use cards, however, they all use them in different ways, which give you a large diversity of options when you are playing. Each of them has different strengths that make them last for long, long decades and be played by millions of players over the years. Simply putting cards like this on the screen, many of you at home will have a natural inclination towards these cards if you play these card games. They all are iconic and stand out in your mind, and that is something that many other card games simply cannot replicate. But my question is, how is this made in every card game, and what's the best part of each card game that keeps you coming back over and over again, remembering these icons? First, I'm going to talk about Magic the Gathering. So, what is the best part of Magic that keeps you coming back year over year? In my opinion, it is Magic's diversity. And I'm not talking about the diversity on this kind of card here, although this diversity is a good thing that has been added to Magic over the years. What I'm talking about is the diversity of the different formats. Magic, being such a popular game, has accrued a massive number of formats over the years, which give you as a player so many different options for how you want to play the game. Not only that, this means that designers can make cards that may be interesting to different types of players and don't have to be played in every format. However, when they make one card that applies to many formats, that's when Magic the Gathering truly sings in my mind. Just showing the card omniscience, depending on what kind of player you are, you will get different feelings and different ideas for how to utilize such a card depending on what formats you play most commonly. If you're commonly a commander player, omniscience is a card that you'll frequently just play in your deck, get up to 10 mana, and start playing down all your spells for free for the rest of the game. However, if you are a legacy player, you probably use omniscience with show and tell, a card that can put it from your hand into play for free, making this a potent combo deck in a 1v1 matchup. Not to mention this, there's also standard, which has recently gotten omniscience back, and combined with Abdulah's Awakening, lets you put it into play for effectively 5 mana, cutting omniscience's cost in half and letting you pull off powerful combos if you could only get omniscience into your graveyard. In this way, a card like omniscience, which kind of seems like it's only designed for big mana formats like Commander, can see tons of play all over the place with all sorts of different combos and enabling that can be done by other cards. This is the struggle that Magic designers face over and over again, and part of the reason why the game is so beloved by so many different kinds of people. If you have something for everyone, it can absolutely appeal to all different kinds of players, meaning that you can appeal to basically anyone who wants to play a card game. Preserving different formats for players so that way they can still come back and play in low power formats like limited or standard, but also adding to future formats like legacy or modern that are more powerful is a super duper difficult task and something that Wizards designers try to execute on over and over again over the years. In my opinion, one of the blocks that most represents them executing on the struggle of implementing cards into many different formats at the same time is the original Innistrad block, featuring Innistrad, Dark Ascension, and Avacyn Restored. Restoration Angel from Avacyn Restored is a perfect example to me of a card that is powerful in Standard, but can also bleed into other formats like Pioneer or Modern. This card being strong enough to be powerful in Standard by flickering your guys, potentially saving them from removal or re-triggering ETB effects, is both relevant in weaker and slightly higher power level formats, as the more powerful the ETBs are in all of those different formats, the better Restoration Angel gets. A card like Liliana of the Veil is definitely memorable in the modern format, as Resource Denial is a super powerful archetype that is very prevalent in modern formats. However, this also overlaps to legacy formats where Liliana's Resource Denial over the course of the game can also be used in different stack style decks, meaning that Liliana is not only iconic for modern, but can also see play in other formats as well. And this video can't go without mentioning my favorite card from Innistrad block, Delver of Secrets. This is the type of card that you can print into your game for limited formats. However, it'll see play all the way back to the oldest formats because of its power level for low cost. Caring about instants and sorceries is what basically every legacy deck will end up doing, and Delver of the Secrets is an absolute staple one-drop in legacy since its printing because of this high power level, meaning that you can print a card that affects legacy a ton but has effectively no issue with going into standard, which is a super interesting design and really shows Wizards' ability to print for specific formats without needing to make a set banned in standard or other formats. And for Magic's most popular format, Commander, there are plenty of cards in Innistrad block which absolutely slot into Commander perfectly and feel almost designed for the format. Blasphemous Act, dealing 13 damage to each creature but costing 1 less for each creature in play, means that it's perfect for a multiplayer format. And not only that, but it can also see play in regular formats if you have some sort of combo with dealing 13 damage to your creatures, or have some way to flood your opponent's board, making Blasphemous Act super cheap to wipe out everything. Many ways to play with this card, and definitely a card designed well for Commander. In this way, having a super iconic block like Innistrad really brings people back to the game in a big way. If you're a Commander player, Standard player, Modern, Legacy, doesn't matter. If they can release a set that appeals to absolutely everyone, almost everyone will jump in, either buy some packs, buy some singles, or otherwise engage in the game in a meaningful way. That is what makes a really good Magic the Gathering setting for me, and that is what really represents the game to me as a whole. Now for Yu-Gi-Oh! So what is the best part of the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And in my opinion, it is its ratio of flavor to function. And when I'm talking about flavor, I'm not talking about Modolches, although I do also think they have great flavor. You can see this even in the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh! Starting relatively slowly with different archetypes such as the Gravekeepers being a way to kind of synergize your entire deck around one idea of a cool iconic card that also has a relevant ability that kind of revolves around an archetype. In this case, Necro Valley is the card I think about most when I think about Gravekeepers, and a lot of their cards revolve around that to a lesser extent in the early days, but much more in the future days. By focusing on this more, Yu-Gi-Oh! Gains a lot of support throughout later sets, meaning that they can take older cards that are either iconic or really didn't have a home and give them homes in future sets. A card like Dark Magician didn't really have that much overlap or much of an archetype in the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh! But as the years have gone on and Dark Magician has become more and more iconic as part of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s original setting, Magician's Rod and other cards like it have come out, which not only name Dark Magician specifically, but also help you get other Magician-esque cards, which can help synergize into this Dark Magician archetype that they have formed over the years. Because of this, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has the absolute widest sandbox of any card game on the market and any card game that I think will ever exist. By having the most confusing rules out of any card game, also combines with the room for massive creativity to make basically any archetype that they could possibly dream of in Konami's headquarters. If you're not familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh!, this might highlight the example that Yu-Gi-Oh! Can do literally anything they want. So Cosmos, for example, are about Cosmo Farm Girl, which is just a girl living on a planet with her robot dog, and then it becomes a space odyssey about going to space with literal lightsabers. However, it's not Star Wars because it's its own Yu-Gi-Oh! Thing, so they have spaceships and different cards which interact in really interesting ways. Dreaming Namira is all about a girl who dreams, so you place her down in your set zone as she's not really meant to do much. However, she dreams up of these big monsters, which will be summoned. They're called Dream Devourers, and they're all made of candy, which I think is something that you really can't implement in any other card game the same way Yu-Gi-Oh! Has. If I told you to make an archetype in any card game about a girl dreaming about candy and then the candy attacks your opponent, it would be pretty hard to make. However, because of Yu-Gi-Oh's diverse rule set and because of their many, many different card types and ways they can word cards, matching flavor to function in almost any way is possible in Yu-Gi-Oh, meaning that they will never need to do any sort of crossover or different interactions with any other games, as they can simply place anything they want into the game with absolute ease. In this way, Yu-Gi-Oh! Can not only add to fan favorite archetypes, bringing back people who loved the Blue Eyes White Dragon or Dark Magician from when they were a kid, but also introduce new archetypes for people who are really in love with Star Wars or whatever the other big thing that is going on right now. They can simply implement it into their game in any way they want and draw in new players to a new archetype that is really interesting to them personally. Now for Hearthstone. So, what is the best part of Hearthstone? Something that keeps you coming back to Hearthstone year after year. And in my opinion, it is the animation slash feel of the game. And when I'm talking animation, I'm not talking about animating the same way you animate a puppet, though Puppet Master Dorian does have great diamond animations. In Hearthstone, unlike any other digital card game I've seen, there's an animation for absolutely everything. There's an animation for when you are holding out a spell before you cast it, and there is an animation for after you cast the spell, meaning that if you play Fireball, you can see yourself holding the Fireball and then casting it after the fact, which isn't really present in any other card game that I've seen. Not only that, but every single creature in the entire game, including tokens, has a unique line for both playing, attacking, and dying. In this way, when you summon a super duper iconic or massive creature, you can get a really big feel for how that creature is in the game without having to have it have any sort of flavor text or extra dialogue or long explanation of story beforehand. Not to mention that all the creatures with really big health totals or attack totals make huge animations when they crash down on the field, and whenever they attack basically anything, it shakes the entire board, which makes it really feel like a big impact when you attack with a large creature. Hearthstone has even expanded this over the years with their diamond animations for either cards or for hero portraits, making even more animated characters feel super lifelike and present in the game. In my opinion, this is what Hearthstone has always done best, and I can really see that with the diamond cards, which are relatively popular amongst players. This helps make Hearthstone have some of the most memorable icons in card game history without needing to rely on a massive long history of players to bolster them over years and years. In this way, Hearthstone can give otherwise strong cards, which would normally see a lot of play in their game, iconic stories that are really easy to latch onto and become attached to as a player playing the game. In any other game, a card like Mysterious Challenger would just be a large beat stick that you wouldn't really think that much about, just a guy who kind of kills you over the course of the game, but its iconic line coming down saying, "Who am I? None of your business," really sticks in a player's mind when playing with and against the card. And if this can make a card with basically no backstory iconic, taking a card like Ragnaros, which is already iconic in players who played WoW's eyes, really overlaps with the fact that it is a powerful card and also has iconic voice lines whenever it comes in and attacks and says "Die Insect." This kind of card really shows the power of Hearthstone for making icons with very, very little effort put in on Blizzard's side. A card like Patches the Pirate is super duper powerful and had a super iconic charge voice line, which needed to be changed when it was nerfed. And in my opinion, this voice line is really part of the reason that Patches is so iconic to the player base. Not only its power level, but its voice line and attack sound, and seeing it every game really makes you remember this card on a visceral level. And while these voice lines, when repeated over and over again, like on Grim Patron, can sometimes become annoying, they also make it really, really iconic for people both playing with and against the game, and gives different metagames a real different feel because of the card's voice line that comes in and shakes the ground whenever it's seen play. If you see your opponent comboing off with Grim Patron, you will hear the same voice line of "Everyone get in here" repeated over and over and over again before you die or you kill your opponent if you're playing the patron itself, meaning that you will not only latch onto Grim Patron as a card, but also gain lots of knowledge on what Grim Patron actually did in the original WoW game. Because of the amount of care and attention to detail given to every single Hearthstone card, every minion and spell having its own special animation really makes it so that way games play out in a way that are much more memorable than they otherwise would be. In this way, you can have many cards that are super memorable to you because of one specific game where a card came out and saved you, and you can remember it by its voice line, its card art, its attack and death animation, and all the different things that make up the card game. In this way, Hearthstone's polish really slides into a way that is not present in any other card game and makes these cards memorable even years after they have stopped seeing play. And finally, for Pokemon. So, what is the best part of the Pokemon trading card game? And in my opinion, it is the cost. And I'm not talking about this microtransaction cost in the online client because that is an atrocity. And I'm also not talking about buying booster packs because buying these 6 booster packs costs you $150, which is also an atrocity because the scalpers suck, in my opinion. I don't think this is a really controversial thing to say that the cost of booster packs and the microtransactions are terrible in Pokemon's case. So then how can I justifiably say that the cost of Pokemon is the best part of the card game if all of these aspects cost so much? Well, if we look at a card like Dragapult EX, this is the best card in the standard metagame right now and is being played to win multiple tournaments over the course of the game. How much do you think the entire deck for Dragapult EX costs? It's only $67. Going down only one spot on the tier list for Gardevoir EX, another super powerful deck. This deck only costs you $56. If I told you you could get the best deck in the metagame on any other card game, it would cost either an indeterminate amount in Hearthstone's case or a massive amount of money in either Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh's case, many hundreds of dollars to get the best possible deck. But in Pokemon, the cards cost so little that these decks cost you less than $60. How is this possible? The idea with Pokemon is that it is mostly pay to collect. If you hear people complaining about the price of Pokemon cards, they are most likely people trying to collect the cards, not actually play with them. This is why a set such as Surging Sparks, which is a set that was recently released, however, doesn't have a ton of standard playable staples in it, will still end up costing $20, which is quite high for a normal pack of Pokemon cards. These sort of more collector sets featuring prize cards like Pikachu EX Alt Art here, which costs you $350, will end up going for so much, despite the fact that if you actually want to play the game, you don't need to buy almost any Searching Sparks packs because most of the cards in them are simply not needed to play the game on a competitive level. The most brilliant thing, in my opinion, however, is these collector edition sort of cards like alternate Pikachu EX or alternate Gardevoir EX still cost quite a bit of money, but can still be played in the standard metagame if you really want to spend a lot of money and bling out. Gardevoir EX here costs $80, much less than the Pikachu, even though the card is way, way better because one card is purely for collectors and one card is both for collectors but also for people who want to play the game proper. In this way, Pokemon can make it so that way the staples that you will be playing with absolutely every single game in almost every deck can cost you almost nothing compared to collectors trying to get a single chase copy of Pikachu EX or whatever costing $350. A card like Ultra Ball, which is an absolute staple in almost every single competitive Pokemon deck, costs less than $1, only about $4 if you want to get a full playset of them. And once you have a full playset of them, you can play them in almost any single deck in the entire metagame. In this way, if you want to play Pokemon for cheap and get into it easily, it is accessible to literally almost anyone who has any amount of money. However, if you want the nicest deck possible, or if you want a massive Pokemon collection, it's going to cost you a lot more, meaning that Pokemon both hits a striking balance where they can still make a lot of money off collectors and people who want to bling out their decks. However, they don't need to upcharge all the people who are younger who maybe don't have access to as much income to play a card game, meaning that Pokemon has by far the largest player base of young people, not only because Pokemon is popular amongst kids, but also because the entrance level is so low for Pokemon and it is made so easy for you to play powerful cards and powerful decks. In conclusion, all of these card games clearly show different aspects of making players stick around for many, many years or come back to card games after having a hiatus or playing something else for a while. This way, these card games all do these better than any other card game on the market that I've seen right now. Magic's ability to pull many different players in from all different walks of life and all different metagames with single cards that really reach out to all different types of metagames. Yu-Gi-Oh has a bunch of really interesting archetypes that all overlap in interesting ways, meaning that if you can see an archetype that you really fall in love with, you can see how not only other archetypes overlap when the new one comes out, but you can also get excited whenever legacy support comes to your archetype and you can see how your deck has changed over the years. Hearthstone's unique animations and voice lines make it feel and play better than almost any other card game on the market, even after the 10 years where all the other card games have had the option to come out with better animations or quality. Hearthstone still stands atop the pack as the most beautiful looking card game that you can play online right now, meaning that you can get super attached to many cards and get a super good feeling for playing the game over many, many years. And Pokemon has the lowest barrier to entry out of any card game that I have ever seen, meaning that if you simply want to learn to play the game, it has never been easier to play Pokemon than any other card game on the market. In this way, Pokemon both is friendly to new kids and also friendly to people who want to learn how to play card games for the first time. Pokemon is the absolute best entry point. If you want to learn a card game, Pokemon is the one that I would start with. All of these are aspects that are great for veterans and new players alike, being a way to bring new players into the game, but also keep players sticking around for years and years and years. And in my opinion, this is why these card games have stuck around for so long compared to all the other ones that haven't survived. But in this video, I've only talked about specific things that each of these card games does better than any other. But there are some things that end up helping all of these card games together. And you might be wondering, what are those? In my next video, I'm going to talk about why these different card games have some overlapping elements that help keep people around and what other card games sometimes miss out on, making it so that way they won't stick around as long as the big four here. Like and subscribe if you want to see content just like this one in my next video, and also like and subscribe if you want to see more content talking about card games in the future. Let me know in your comments about your favorite part of these card games. There's so many things to love about them, and I was just trying to talk about the top ones of my mind, so let me know down in the comments what your favorite part about the card games I talked about in this video are. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.